paste my API key in there, and now I should be able to run this. Let's see what happens. There you go. So I get a big response out. There's a ton of stuff in here. It's tripled the length of my entire notebook. But what this is a list of dictionaries with key value pairs explaining different parts of the model. So it's got, okay, it's got the root, which looks like that means the name. It's got all the different permissions, which it can use. Not really sure what that is. It's got who it's owned by. And this is a list of all the different kind of models. So all the ones that we just saw in the documentation, wherever it went, those are the ones which will show up in here. And I believe this is also where models that you can upload to OpenAI, fine-tuned variations of their models, I believe they'll show up here as well. So you can keep all of your work in one place. I want to delete the output of this cell just because it's huge. So I'll come back to this later. But one thing you can do is fine tune this model. So if you want to take one of the models and specialize it to a particular domain, you can easily do that using the API. If we get around to it, we can try and find a data set and use this later. There's a guide there, which I've linked to, which talks about how to fine tune. And if you go to the API reference, you can find out how to do that fine tuning as well. So this kind of shows you how to do it in code, explains all the different parameters and such. I skipped over actually how you would find this if you didn't know, right? And I want to emphasize that the most important thing is that you can read this documentation. So if you didn't know how to do something like list the models or make a request, but you think the API is capable of it, then you should consult the documentation. So if I wanted to understand how to list the models, I would go to the documentation. I'm on the OpenAI console. I'd go to the documentation here. Maybe I'd read about, I'd take a look around here. Okay, I can't really see anything. Models, there you go. Okay, I can get an overview of the models. But how do I actually do this? How do I make requests to list the models? I'd look at the API reference. So this is all of the specific details of how you use the API, what parameters things take, what endpoints are listening for requests. That is what URL on the internet is listening for a request and what's the format. And if I go down to models here, you'll see this is how it's done. So it says list models. This is something that lists the currently available models and provides basic information about each one, such as the owner and the availability. On the right-hand side, the documentation is excellent. It's really good. It shows you exactly how to do it. You can copy that straight out of the notebook and into your application if you want to do it in Python, or you can change it to Node, see how that's done in Node, again, copy it, or you can change that to curl. And that's a request you can make directly from the command line. Question, what is this? Is that too small? What is that? Get. Any ideas? Anybody worked with APIs before? What's the get? 2 nods, yes?
So just basically use the API for all that gets information, doesn't change the state.
Yeah, so so gets information. What else is there? Are there other options I can have rather than get? Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is one of many different types of HTTP requests you can make, right? You can make GET requests, POST requests, patch requests, delete requests, different types of requests, and they will change how you make this call. So I think this is by default, curl makes a GET request, but other APIs you may need to make different types of requests. It doesn't matter too much. Most of the requests you need to make is either GET or POST. GET is to get information, POST is to send an update into information. And so this is the endpoint. This is what I'm talking about, right? This is a URL online that we can make requests to, and it understands how to receive the body in the way the documentation describes, and understands how to give me the response back. So under the hood, when we use Python, when we run this, it's sending a request to this URL. And what's interesting is you can probably whenever you open a page in a browser, it makes a GET request to a web page. And that web page knows how to respond with HTML, which you see on that page. So all those kind of things, most of the way that information is transferred across the internet, especially to be shown in a browser, or whether it's used in Python through an API, is through this request format. Anyway, a little bit too much detail there, but I'm happy to go into that further if people want to understand. Luckily enough for us, we can just make these function calls in Python. So now I want to request text completions. So given all of that I've showed you, given that I've shown you how to set up the OpenAI API, I've showed you how to use the documentation, I've showed you how to find the code, I want you to complete this. It would take 10 minutes to do this, and I can solve any issues whilst we're doing that as well. What I want to do is get a completion. Given some text prompt, I want you guys to figure out, how do I send this text prompt to the API, and how do I get the response back? Bonus, if you get past that easily, try and unpack it so you've just got the text. Take a look at what the response gives you if you're not sure what I mean there. So I'll give you 10 minutes to do that. Any questions? Shout out. Yeah, it's a limitation for these models apparently. Plus, you know what? If you want to say programming, yeah, would it? Yeah, I'm not, I'm not a viewpoint with it. But in this case, you basically just make either a word or a part. Why is it a limitation? Why is it not $2? It's not just making it cheap, but I can just make it bigger. It's because of the algorithm that's used, it's the model, the transform has this quadratic. So you need to take the number of tokens and that's squared, that's the computation to, so it grows exponentially. Yeah, well, ideally you have only a few tokens, for 3 tokens, I need to do 9 computations. So for this, it's 2049 squared. And then it becomes intractable. This dictionary is surplus using index, and then you use this index to yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I think yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, I agree. But oh yeah, oh, you can do this. We go out with the heroes and usually they will have people run someone. It knows how to receive certain requests. And it knows how to so right now it's interacting with yes, menu. You can access them on like. Let me check out. Yes.
Cool. Everybody's getting this. There's a few common issues people are running into. So let's go through that. So we want to do a text completion. What do? We go to the documentation, like I showed. We go to completions. Completions there, you can see the code. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to complete this text so far. Here's it in Python. I copy that, take it into my notebook, remove the stuff which I've already done or don't need. That's what I want my completion to be. And I run that and it works. I get this completion. So here it is. This is what comes back from the API. It's a Python dictionary with a number of different keys, and each of them have a value. And somewhere in there, there's text. So that's kind of, that's what I wanted to get out. But I told you guys we want to use the GPT 3.5 turbo model, not this default text DaVinci 003. So what a lot of people have done is put that in there and then try to run it again. And now there's an issue, right? What do I do in this issue? I don't cry, I don't complain. Read the error. The error is, this is a chat model. It's not supported in the V1 completions endpoint. Did you mean to use v1/chat/completions? What does that mean? That's a bit cryptic. But remember what I said, guys. Under the hood of this Python API, each of these different function calls is just trying to hit a different endpoint. There's a different URL on the internet, which is listening to particular types of requests, and they expect a particular format of data. This one, the one that gets called under here, doesn't like this as a parameter. It said this model is not a completion model. This is a chat completion model. So what do I need to do in this case? Well, it's probably a different function call because it's hitting a different endpoint. So I go back to documentation, and if I look around, well, just below that, you'll see chat. You think about what we're trying to do. We are trying to build a chat system back and forth. And so if you go into the chat completion API reference, you'll see a similar thing, but this one is for chat completions. And this one already has actually the GPT 3.5 turbo model. This one creates a model response for a given chat conversation. I'll put this in here and run that. Now the response comes back. That's great. So that's that. Any questions? Any other issues people having? There was a lot of hands up. Good questions going around. Yes.
So we cannot use the completion model as that completion model.
You can, but you need to do it from a certain endpoint, right? Like each of these different functions, they have constraints on what parameters you can use. This one can expect GPT 3.5 turbo. It can't expect the Babbage model, that kind of thing. So different models are, and the reason for this is because different models are optimized for different things. Some of them are optimized to just complete the text. Others are optimized to respond as another individual. So that's what the chat models are trained on. They are large language models trained on the internet of data firstly, and then they're fine-tuned to chat conversations. So they begin to model that kind of back and forth interaction, and that makes them behave much more like chatbots would, as you want them to, if you're using the chat completions endpoint. So if you want to build a chatbot, it makes sense to use the chat completions endpoint. Whereas if you try to build a chatbot with the completions endpoint, you may have to do a lot of prompt engineering on the end of your text, manually adding, saying, what did the bot say next? Because the completion to that would be what the bot said next. So that's the kind of way you might do that. But again, those completion models, they haven't been fine-tuned to understand that back and forth nature any more particularly than they have been trained to model the whole internet. So not very specialized. Great question. Yes.
An authentication error means the API key is not working.
Yeah. So in this case, there's some kind of steps that I've got to try and tackle that here, because this is a very common thing. So firstly, ensure that you've created an account, you've got an API key, you've replaced my placeholder API key. So make sure that you have put it in here and run the cell, not just put it in there, but you actually need to run that cell. So there's a green tick next to it as well. Sometimes that doesn't work. So what to do in that case is just create a new API key and try that again. Yeah, so just create a new one in the console, replace it here, and try and run that whole process again. If that doesn't work, make sure you've got a paid account set up. I think those are all the steps. If that doesn't work, grab me in a second and we'll go through one-to-one. Cool. Issues? Yes, questions? Sorry, on a what, sorry? On M2, the M2 issues. Let's take a look in a sec. I think you should be able to find it on the Conda installation website, but I know it can be prone to those kind of issues. Okay, all right. Not all of them are language-based. There is, well, it depends what you mean by language-based. So there are, let's have a look. They don't have any, well, they do have, these generative models in a sense are predictive because they, given an input, they predict what is a likely output, and that's how they're formatted. But you can't get any like tabular predictive models if you've got numerical data on this API. And in terms of language-based or not, a lot of them are language-based. So text, chat, completion. Guys, just focus for a second. But there are these image generation or or Whisper, which is speech to text. So yeah, some variety there. Did I answer the question? Cool, good stuff. Any other hands? Yes. Yes. Is that are you talking about the keyword arguments for the functions? Yeah. Cool. You changed this one, for example? Yeah. Okay, cool. So you said you changed this to assistant. Great. So this comes to the point I want to mention next. Let's hold on that for 5 minutes, and I'll give a better example of it just then. So we've got this response. The next thing I want you guys to do is to unpack the response. So how would you take everything that's in there and actually just get the text which you want out? Because all that we really want is this, okay? So that is inside a Python dictionary, inside a Python dictionary, inside a list, inside a Python dictionary. So you need to index those 4 things to get the actual content out, and then you have the raw text to present back to the user. So you guys are going to do that, and then immediately after, we'll do this all in one. We're going to wrap that into a function. So in this function, I'm going to do both those things, because in our case, there's not going to be a time where I get a completion and don't unpack it. So here I'm going to put the completion. I'll just take my code from above. This one seemed to work fine. And then come back down to this function. I'll put that in there. And then I need to basically take in the messages, which are going to be called with this function. So instead of having that hard-coded function there, I'm going to change that to that messages variable. And then the prediction, I'll save that for later, okay? In fact, I'll just say that's equal to the completion right now. So this function, when I call it, is going to get the response from that chat completion for these messages so far. And if you scroll down, I've got some examples. So example 1, this is the messages. And example 2, This is the messages. Now, somebody asked me a good question, which is why, when you give it 3 different messages, doesn't it give you 3 different responses? And so that's kind of, you know, an obvious misunderstanding. And so to understand what this messages means and how it's used, always refer to the documentation, right? If we go to the documentation, go to the API reference, go to chat completions, scroll down, it'll give you here full description of the entire format that's expected for this request. So we've got the model, we've got the messages. The messages says this is a list of the messages describing the conversation so far. So it's not that we're going to get responses to each of these messages. It's that these messages make up the entire prompt, which the model is then going to give you a completion in the form of a chat response to. And so indented there, what this means is that these are the things which each of the messages need to contain. It's a list of messages, and these things are going to be a dictionary with 3 different keys: role, content, and name. The role, this is who is the author of this message, and you can change it between user and assistant or system. So depending on how you want the conversation to be interpreted by the model, you might want to tell it it's a different user. It's going to behave differently if you know the past 3 messages were by the same person, and you might want to do that in some certain cases, or whether they come from the user. And then we've got system. Anybody know what the system is? System message. Yes.
It's the instructions you give to the model, like the role it has to play.
Cool. Yeah. Can you give me an example?
Like the most typical is like UI, helpful assistant.
Exactly. Yeah. So fantastic. Yeah. Perfect. So spot on. So the system message is like priming the context for the conversation that follows, right? Now this is separate from part of the actual conversation itself. It's more just like the framing for it. So as our friend said there, I'll get your name later. You could say something like, you are a helpful assistant. You're trained to behave in a professional way, and whatever. But this is where you can kind of inject character and some form of flexibility into the models which you're using. You can say, you respond consistently sarcastically, or you're always really enthusiastic. All those kind of things. So I want you guys to try it, actually. Try and put in a system message as the first message in your sequence of messages, and prime it so that it behaves differently. And you should see immediately that you can control the behavior, the character, the personality of this model just by adjusting that system message. And then you've got the other 2 parameters which need to go into each message. You've got the content of the message and the name, which I don't know where that's used. Maybe that's kind of, I'm not sure where that's used. Maybe the bot kind of responds to you by name. So play around with that as well. But the name is not necessary. The role and the content are necessary. So that's the conversation so far. So guys, yeah, take 10 minutes, fill in this function, make sure it works for those. Figure out how to unpack the response if you haven't already done that, and then play around with the system message. And if somebody can figure out how the name is used, that'll be excellent as well. I'll run around more answers and help.
No, working is like few days like as time over.
Well, the thing is,
Like it's not over.
the thing is, it is playing, but they've like aligned it so much that it's very cautious about it. So not anything subjective.
Yeah.
It tends to be, it wants to clarify.
Yeah.
So everything what I say is true. But if you scroll along, you'll probably see
Yeah.
it's common option that you know it's like
Yeah.
maybe this is the kind of thing you can adjust with the system message. So if you set the first message with a system message, it says something like you're my boss, I want to see how it behaves then, and it should
So existing message is basically just give the model.
yeah, that's one of the key use cases. The context which can include other things, right? You could say, you could say that the white boss or you also say like the details of the forest fire. Build all this context. the amount of applications like game, and you want characters to behave in relate those situations. So you might always see that this is like oh no, I don't. This is the. I'm trying to flush that out. I'm trying to say, trying to track people that trying to like, you tell it what much they have. Very hungry boys, very boys. Say what again? Right. I really want. Yeah, no, it's not just working. Yeah. I've got the. Let's see. Yeah, you will need to pay.
So actually, every time you put it into a
You're an expert.
I mean, right? I just said to things that.
Yeah, there you so whether it's a get or a post request or a different kind of request, that's kind of if you change this to you'll see that it has this yeah, not Python. So what happens under the hood is Python will use curl and curl makes requests. That's why. Yeah, you don't need to. All this is saying is this is So that's already code. Show me
Yeah, the lines were really.
It's very simple. So you can always tell whether it's a dictionary, key value will be pair, or it's a list, just a sequence of like. Inside it has your original and a nation power. If you're in this dictionary, you want a square bracket and then you can name the key. So in your case, for example, say completion. Square bracket.
Oh, it's just finish. It tells me. Yeah, just put. Yeah, that's the thing. Oh, yes, yes. No,
Doesn't have to be about parents. Well, this one, that's good. Key values and versus just. So that's now you need to continue. And then you want to finish. I believe you to do So, yeah, so that's the issue here is this one pointed out. So, it's errors happening on line 1, that's here, so it's in this one, and on there it says GP 3.5 the chat model, not application model. So you can use model type in chat. So so that's what Yes. It's probably so we should
Yeah, essentially.
So this is just yeah, the first part is just slowly getting the response. The second part, when you find this
This is what you want.
just yes, it's very backlight model, okay. So moving swiftly forward, I hope you guys have figured out how to do that. Anybody want to fill me in? How do I extract the predicted text from the completion? If I just print that here, and then we have a look at how that looks. We get this back. So this thing, I need to extract this text from. So how do I do that? Can somebody help me there? Sorry, there's not much. Hard to show it at the same time, isn't it? Okay, so how do I get out this content in this line here? Can somebody help me? Sorry, who was that? Completion. So you said dot choices. And then 0 brackets. Okay. Oh, sorry, you said dot message. Dot content. Great. Cool, let's print that. Run, see if that works. I need to call a function. That one, where is the response? Yeah, cool. So here's the response. Here's how we got that out. Now that's quite smart what you've done there, actually. I didn't realize that you could do that. But there's a different way to do the same thing. Can somebody show me a different way, which is very similar? Sorry? Yeah, exactly. I was treating the completion as a pure Python dictionary and indexing the choices like that. Then getting the 0th item there, then getting the message, then getting the content. And that would be what you'd need to do if this was a Python dictionary. However, I think this prediction is actually not a dictionary, is it? It's something like an OpenAI response type, something like that. And so in that custom class, which OpenAI have defined, it has these methods defined which just correspond to the keys. Not too much of something to worry about, but something interesting to note. But the easy way to do it would just be something like that can work with raw native data types. So we run that, and you can see that this thing now works for single messages and multiple messages. And I heard there was some good success trying out the system message. Anybody get anything interesting with that? Anybody get to try the system message? Raise your hands. It worked. Looks cool. Nice. I haven't played around with that too much myself. Cool. So this point I'm going to skip over because it's really it's rather simple and the example is trivial here. But this is where we would plug in the moderations. So if you had something you want to moderate, does it violate a content policy? Is it harmful, inappropriate, whatever else is on OpenAI's content policy? Then you can you can send it to the moderations endpoint and get back a dictionary which contains information like, hey, is this harmful, etc. And so you could use that to make sure people aren't even able to send requests to your bot, which could, cause it to behave inappropriately. Whatever your application is doing. And you may... So in this application, what I've done here is I've said you should moderate the response from OpenAI. That's probably not something you're really going to need to do, because I think they're doing that in the background anyway. Whenever they get a response from their big model, which they have in their computer, they're probably making sure that it's behaving appropriately. Otherwise, they'd risk their own proprietary model sending inappropriate stuff to the user. So probably more like what you want to do is moderate the user inputs and make sure they're appropriate. Cool. So I'll skip over that. And now I want to kind of combine that all together. This is, I think, the time where I can give you guys to focus and have a bit of fun playing around with it. But what we want to do is like create this application now. I want to have something where I run this code cell, I get the start of a story, I get the user to put an input and then complete it, and then I get the model to return it, and I want to do that in a loop, okay? So take 10 minutes to try and implement that now. This is like the game loop. You should run this, and it should be a chatbot which you can interact with in Python, okay? Take a moment to do that, and then we'll keep moving on. Then we'll get onto the images.
Yeah, most of the same time. So if you go to your overview build, you need to start. Yeah, I mean, it's fine. If you set that up, yeah, I assume you have to make any requests. Yep, they don't do it. Fair enough. Yeah, maybe hit the freezer. Not sure. Yeah. Put it on. That's good. Yeah. Too long to bring your error. So it looks like what's happening. This is your so I reckon at the end of that, I'm going to take it's not because it will tell you what it's on
What about very? Yeah. And that this is a lot more. Maybe go to order from, yeah, I don't know, or we just drink. Oh, I know what mine is.
Oh, well, that's probably because I'm giving it like a gibberish response. It makes sense. So, I'll leave you to figure it out. Something different than to show you anything with media. I reckon this is because, I reckon because format needs to be a list of people.
What other?
I put it in one function. It was totally fine, but I wanted to add the image in later.
Yeah. I'm wondering if it's going to fail with the operation. It's going to find things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, try and find out. What does the response give you? Does it give you like a probability or a confidence? So what's the documentation of the choice? I'm not sure how it ranks.
I guess the responses are collected and maybe I have to do extra.
Yeah, probably will have your own.
Okay, I know the state of zero, then it might be.
I mean, that's how it ranks. It's hard. It's like it's best. What's the best?
What did the champion team do in this situation? I couldn't find that's why I used them. It is normal, but it's okay. Zero.
Yeah.
Right, okay, it's green one. Or black, I'm gonna do the question.
Yeah, I think just take the first one. I assume they are all equally.
So it's not like the green one, but what you make it to.
Yeah, I think you could
It's like, okay, no, it's not, I mean, the thing is, right?
having that probably communicates probably this response to the
Well,
prompt
this,
and
context,
and then respond.
you know, which of these is the vice? You can access it. I'm just thinking, why not are you doing this all together? Instead of doing a regenerate, when you have the context to regenerate, it's like, I already get one request. And in my, instead of, yeah, we sell, like, asking this to read it, trying to reduce it.
Well, I guess I mean that's something we could do through having multiple choices anyway. So for example, yeah, you could just get multiple responses anyway, and then and then
I think
show the first one. If you don't like the first one, you can go on to show the next one, and you've got more. I mean, regardless of whether you use it. The latency of the API is milliseconds anyway. So it shouldn't matter that much. 0.4 seconds is the possibly to go over barriers between the Docker key.
That's like,
Okay, so check Discord. There's a link to the GitHub repo, and in there, there's a HTML file. You can start with that one. It's rubbish, but yeah. If you've got that extension, did you see that? Yeah. Cool, good stuff. Yeah, it's really nice. It just lets you act as if, yeah, it kind of skips out the whole, usual development setup you need with React and everything.
how would you set it up?
If I was to start, I would React.
So you're learning. So I'll have to learn React.
Yes. Or you could get very cheap.
But like, why would I build my own APIs?
Because you might have other data sources which you want to extract with, but you don't want to expose that on the web app. Because then you have a point about that kind of thing. Or there's processing, which is rather powerful enough. Because you also have for example, which users are logged in, which users are making.
I can be on the database. I'm in the database.
It's up to you, right?
We can do text. If we have a prompt. Oh, yeah, you're right. Oh, no. You can change how many shots you want. How do I maintain the search?
That's good question. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not sure, what you want me to do. So this function is basically printing an output in the next line. So that's just not the thing you put into the model. It's just like a screen of what it is going to be the next thing you put in the model. So it's like this. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And at the end of this function, we return messages, which is a list of messages, which is yeah. But like we already have prepared it into the messages, like those. Like what does it mean? Like. So this line, what I found was you just do this and I think was like the model is used like you get but it's it would say like what you can do and make it form with it
Okay. So guys, I'm gonna run through a quick version of this. I'm gonna start from scratch, to be honest, because just to highlight the point, like it doesn't really matter my template. You can do this in any format you want, and really it's gonna vary on what you're trying to achieve. But let's kind of think through the process which you would go through to create this application, right? So if I just create like a main function to start with, try and make it big so you guys can see it. No, it's too big. If I start with a main function, right? I'm gonna in there somewhere. I'm gonna want to use the get completion, which I had, and it's gonna take in some messages. So initially, I'll need some messages. So I'll initialize that with an empty list of messages. I'm gonna need to have that that role that role set to the user and the content set to something like, give me the first line of a story. And, I'm thinking like, okay, I'm probably just going to want it to get me completions consistently. So this is going to go inside a loop while true. So this is going to continue to happen, whatever goes in there. The messages is going to, this is the completion which came out of that, isn't it? Got to remind myself what's in my function now. So my get completion function, it doesn't return anything right now. It needs to return that prediction. I'm going to remove these prints as well so it doesn't get messy. That should be good. Redefine that function. Not the fastest thing. Okay, but then back down here, now I'm going to get my completion, and I want to somehow like extend the messages, right? So it's probably going to be messages.append some kind of new message. I'll say new message is equal to, it's going to be a dictionary as usual, role. This one came from the assistant, and the content was the completion. And then I'm going to append that new message. So that creates like an extended version of this, which I'm going to then pass in as my new series of messages. Will this work? Am I missing anything really obvious right here?
You need to add a user.
Sorry?
You need to add a user message.
I need to add a user message. Yeah, totally. I need to, of course, get the user input for the next part. So how do I do that? New message again. How do I get an input from the user? Someone said it. I'm not hearing much confidence. You guys should have confidence. This is the easy part. Input function, yes. What does it take as a parameter? Yeah, what's the prompt in this case? Yeah, enter a message. Well, let's be more specific. Something more story related. What happened next? That's what the user gets prompted with, okay? Again, just to clarify, I'm saying prompted, but I'm not talking about LLM prompt here. This is just going to show up for the user. I get the new message. What do I do with it? Nobody feeling confident? I append it to my messages. In fact, I'll do it something just like this. But of course, that new message needs to be wrapped in a dictionary. So I'll just overwrite it like this. And yeah, this is going to be from the user. Okay, then what do we do? I guess we should probably print things, right? We should probably print the completion from the bot. And let's just see what happens there. We'll probably realize we're missing something basic, but if I run that, it was a dark and stormy night. What happened next? It was raining, and then it was raining heavily as I approached the secluded cabin in the woods. So it feels like that was quite like a completion, right? It seems to have directly just continued that story. Am I using the right API? Yeah, I'm using chat completion. So okay, so what could we do to kind of make it respond in a more like back and forth way? How could I change this? Is there any other prompt engineering I could do in here?
The system.
I could change the system. Yeah. But is there anything I could just add on to the text, which is going into these, or maybe there's like a hard-coded message I could send after this? I'm gonna do something like this, right? I'm gonna get another new message, and I'm gonna add it on, and this one is just gonna say, tell me the next line. Tell me the next line of the story. Something like that. So we're actually kind of being explicit about what should happen next. And this will kind of cut off the completion. And it should hopefully respond with just the next line of the story. Let's see what happens here. Oh, I think I need to stop this first, don't I? Yeah. Stop it and run it. The old house and the old hill had always been shrouded in mystery. I approached the house. And then it kind of goes into the next sentence. So here we're doing it sentence by sentence rather than sentence continuing over. And that was all a result of just this little bit of prompt engineering, right? I just added away from the user. The user didn't see this line. When I was interacting with it, I didn't see that it was adding this line as the prompt, but it is added after every single response. And that, as you can see, it kind of made sure that this wasn't just continued by the model, but what was added on was was what followed this. Tell me the next line of the story, full stop. Next thing is going to be the next line of the story. And there's a lot of little stuff like this you can do, right? You can add in little bits of context, hard-coded messages to encourage the model to respond in a certain way. So I'm sure you guys will figure that out for your own application. Cool. There's something very inefficient about the way I've done that. If I add it into the messages, and the entire prompt history is going to be littered with like, tell me the next line of the story. It probably doesn't need to happen. So I probably don't need to add it to my messages. I probably want to remove it after. Anyway, I won't do that now. This works. It kind of illustrates the point. So there you have it, right? There's we've created a back and forth storytelling system with just this simple code and functions defined. Any questions? Anybody want to kind of extend that in any certain way or point out anything which really sucks about what we've done so far? Anybody get it to do anything interesting on their side?
How did you write your greater completion function?
Beautifully.
All right.
Well, right on the documentation that the GPT 3.5 Turbo one does not pay a strong attention to the system messages, and then you should include the instructions in the user message itself. Like, how do you navigate that? How do you face this in your projects?
Cool. That's great. I didn't notice that. So where is that?
I think if you go to documentation,
Chat completion.
yeah, instruction chat. Yeah. So that line is there.
Okay, yeah, cool. I mean, there's probably a bunch of gold in here that you guys should take on when you develop these things. But, you know, for example, if you realize you're using a particular model that's released on the 1st of March, it might not pay strong attention to the system message, and therefore important in messages instructions are user place in a user message. There's probably a bunch of more little things like that. It's just a case of reading documentation, making sure you're aware of those. Cool. So who got like an exciting working story? Does anybody get it working? I've seen a good few nods. Nice. Anybody get anything particularly outstanding story-wise, or adapt the application to do anything else interesting? We're all kind of following my lead. All right, nice. Well, I'll give some space to kind of build your own thing shortly. But I realize we're taking a while, so I'm going to keep moving through this. And I want to quickly show you the image setup, which is a really exciting part, right? So another part of the API endpoint is the image generation API endpoint. This is using the DALL-E model, and it can be used to create images from text prompts. So something just like this, you can copy, put it into your code. I've got a function here that says create image from text, and once we get that back, we can extract the image from the response. So here's where I'm going to get this response. I'm going to put something like this in there. I've just copied that code over straight away. Let's have a look at what it does. it makes a call to the image part of the API and calls a create function. Given a prompt, how many images we want, that's an n, and the size. So I'm going to change that to 1. I'm going to make the image smaller so it's faster. And here's what we give the prompt. What might we want the prompt to be in our case? Well, probably part of the story, right? So I'm going to take in the text which comes so far, and I'm going to add on the end of it something like, you know, summarize, maybe let's say like, describe a visualization of the latest scene in the story above, right? That'll be a simple way to, oh no, sorry, that's not what I need to do right now, is it? Okay, so if this function is designed to create an image prompt from the text is my whole story so far, but the text is not going to be a good prompt for the image. So what I want to do is come up with a good prompt for the image. So what I actually want to do here is do something like, is get a completion for all of my story so far, and then add on the end of it something which describes what should happen in the next line. So I might have the whole story, and I add a final message, which is something like, describe a visualization of the scene, and what that should give me in the next message, responded from the bot, would be a good image prompt. And that's what I'm going to send into the next function. So just to give the outline of that, I need to pass in the image prompt to the image create function. To get the image prompt, I need to get a completion of the story so far, which is going to be passed into this function. So that's what comes in here. This is my messages, list of dictionaries. And what I want to do is add on the end of that text.append this like new message, which is going to be the image prompt message. So I'm going to have this this list of text, and I want to do the image prompt message is equal to a new message where the role is the user and the content is something like this. So that next message is basically me saying, bot, the next thing that you should do is respond with describing a visualization of the latest scene in the story above. Has anybody got any questions about that? I feel like that was poorly explained. Yep.
Is there a section in the documentation about the prompt engineering technique?
There's a lot of stuff online. There's probably rough guidelines in the OpenAI documentation, but there's like so much of it available online. People finding all different kind of interesting keywords and ways to phrase things. It's like a big field in itself. Cool. But more detail, it's always a good thing. So now I've got this image prompt message. I should have just I've appended that to my text. Now I get the completion. The next message should be my image prompt, right? But we know that I'll get completion. It returns us the messages. No, it doesn't, does it? It returns us the next text, which is the image prompt. Sorry? Oh, thank you. I'll fix that in a second. Just want to refer back to my get completion. So yeah, this is just going to give me the text back. So once I've got that text back, that should be my image prompt. That's the response to this last message, which is describe a visualization of the latest scene in the story above. Is this going to work? I don't know. Let's run it and see. There was a typo. You said whereabouts? Oh, thank you. All right. Let's run this. I'm going to print the image prompt. Invalid syntax there. And I'm going to print that response. Okay, it says string has no attribute append. Where is that happening? Thank you. Yeah. String object has no attribute append. What is my string? Let's have a look. I may be misunderstanding this code that I've wrote. But again, no, you know the deal, always just print it, right? So the text here says it was a dark and stormy night. So where does that text come from? It comes from here, which is the get completion. I probably want to
define new variable called text probably and make a list. You append the text.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably simplify it here by just saying, okay, so we know that now, sorry, my confusion. So text is a string. So instead of doing this stuff, which we might want to come back to later when we have it in our chat format, in this case, text is just a string. So I am going to do text equals text plus that. So I'm just going to add that on the end of the string. So now all of this is just going to be one big like description, or it's going to be a description of the first line story, and then it's going to be describe a visualization of the latest scene in the story above. I feel like I'm massively overcomplicating things now because we could just take that text as the prompt, right? And just see what that does. So if we'd run that, it would give us the image of it was a dark and stormy night, right? We can go into how you could use the API that, like I've tried to illustrate there, to format a better prompt for you. But let's just run that firstly. See what happens. Now we get some URLs back, right? And if you click on these, it's not really working. But we should do some two of the same. So here, right, like we should debug this. We should take a look at what the prompt is. Oh, fair enough. It says as soon as she woke up, she knew something was different. It's a pretty fair response, actually. So it's not, it was a dark and stormy night like I was assuming, but you run that again and get something different. Okay, here we go. The night was dark and stormy, and you get this, right? So you can kind of see like how, I'm being very rough and I'm just trying to illustrate the point here. But if you guys sat down for a day, if you sat down tomorrow and spent Sunday or even Bank Holiday Monday doing this, like you could come up with something really good that really works here. Certainly that works within a Python file just by gluing all these elements together, right? I'm being very rough. This is not beautiful, this setup here, but that's kind of how we could do it. And so yeah, I know I'm running out of time. So I'm going to begin to wrap up because I think that's probably quite clear what's happening there. And we've kind of seen how it can go back and forth. But in these sections here, I'll share the solutions notebook. It's not the GitHub repo, but I'll share it directly in Discord after as well. In these cells here, in the solutions, what I'm doing is taking the whole story, asking the chat completion endpoint to just give me the next line, which is a summary of the whole story visually. It's a description. So I add a line, like I said, something along the lines of, describe the latest scene of the story, describe the camera angle, describe the characters and the color and the energy and that sort of thing. And the more descriptive you are with that prompt, the more consistency you can get in these images. So you can use the chat completion model to get a good prompt for the image, create a nice image, and then show that intertwined with your bot response, user response, and the image to continue to tell the story. So if you run the notebook, which I've left in the solutions, you'll be able to see that working. I know we didn't get onto part 2, so I'll just run through what that looks like very quickly here. And you can kind of see, and I'll point out some of the ways that it all interacts together. But you can follow this in the notebook later. So there is a file in this in the GitHub repo called index.html. This thing, I can write HTML, but I very much just said, ChatGPT, write me a web page which has a chat interface and can make requests to an API. So in all of this mess, you will see basically at some point there's this JavaScript script, and in there it uses this function fetch to make a request to an API. So this endpoint of this API is just something that's running locally. Sorry, that's tiny, isn't it? You guys should say if I do that again. This endpoint here, nope. This endpoint here is going to be the endpoint which my API is running on my own computer. That's why it says localhost. And if you take the file which is in this folder, api.py, it's got a very simple example of how to use fast API. You define a function, something like this. You add this little decorator above it, which tells you how to get which endpoint this should respond to. And in there, you define what comes back. So in a more complicated example down here, I've asked it to use my get completion method with the text. And so it understands how to receive certain responses when they're made to localhost 8000 chat response. What it'll do in that case is just defined in here. It'll get the prediction and it'll send it back to the user. And so that is what is going to appear at the end of this function. I'll get ChatGPT to teach you JavaScript because I'm not going to go into that now. But what comes out of this is then processed by these lines. This one turns it into JSON. This one takes the message, it takes the message, it creates a new division in the page, and it appends that into the document. So what that's going to do is, if I run this with Control-Shift-L, as explained in the notebook, it shows this chat interface. And when I run my API, I'm going to be able to type something in here and hit send. Then it's going to make this request, which gets a chat response. So let me just do that. I've got my API here. I'm going to run it. It's not running. Need to activate this environment. Is that what it's called? Yeah. So as long as you've installed everything, it should be runnable just like a normal Python file is, just by running Python the name of that file. Now it's listening. It's continuing to wait for requests. And if I go back here and hit enter on that, I get an issue, which is that I haven't set my API key in here. Oh no, it's in the other file, which this one imports. So all the code that we just wrote is in this get prediction file. So if I go into getPrediction.py, you'll see I've got my getCompletion method. That's the only one I've got in here right now. And I've got this API key, which I need to replace. I'll do it very quickly, but please don't write a for loop quickly and spam this API key if you're fast enough to copy exactly what it is. But I'm going to copy that in front of you, save that, don't copy it. Kill the API with the Control-C, run it again. Should work now. It's got an updated API key. So that API file, which you guys can look into later, is now listening for requests to these two different endpoints. You can see here it's running on this URL, which is my localhost. That's where I can see what happens if I make a request to the root URL. So that thing's running. And now if I go back to my web page and do a hello, we'll see it just received a post request. Go back here, you get that response. Okay? So this one isn't formatted in the story way, but this one is this is basically, this is ChatGPT. This is how that's set up, using the GPT 3.5 Turbo here to complete the responses. So if you go through that process, you'll be able to run this application. And if you want to take this into a place where you can start creating your own thing, all you need to do is edit that HTML, edit the definition of what methods, what endpoints are available in the API, and then add in the Python code, which makes those requests to do things like generate images in this file. If you run into any issues with that, you can definitely reach out to me on Discord. But I'm going to leave it there as to let you guys go roughly on time and enjoy the rest of the day, catch up with the coronation. So before I do that, any questions people want to run through there? I just covered a lot of stuff. So I'm happy to do another 10 minutes of questions back and forth about all of the code, which you just looked up there. Yep.
I think we didn't cover it, but can we contact you by email for this customized data training and
Message me on Discord. I'll be more reactive there. Cool. Great. Well, look, if there's no more questions, like I said, guys, hit me up on Discord, and I'll be happy to dive into things. Yes.
Models. What would you suggest is the best predictive model outside OpenAI?
Outside of OpenAI, to be honest, I've just been diving into this. Like, this is probably what I'm most familiar with. I don't know. I mean, there is like Open Assistant, isn't there? Yeah, Bard. I haven't used Bard. I'm not sure. Let me look into it. Cool. So before I wrap up, guys, I just want to show. I just want to say. What do I want to say? Is there anything else to do? I want to say thank you for your attention. And as I said last week, again, the first AI Insights Summit, we're having it in London. So there's going to be an afternoon where we're going to talk through a lot of research we've done on what's happening in the industry, talk through what is so far the 6 different questions we think you need to ask to understand where you fit into the future of AI, whether that's career-wise, research-wise, whatever else. So if you want to be there, hang out with me, the rest of the Oxford community, the rest of the AI core community, please scan that, and I really look forward to seeing you there. And there'll be free pizza, which I managed to convince someone to do as well. So with that, guys, again, thank you for your attention, and I'll let you get on with the day. Any questions, feel free to grab me here. Otherwise, I'll see you on Discord.